Every club. Every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Daily Liverpool Podcast, brought to you by the Global Sports Podcast Network. I'm Ardash and it's Crossover Thursday. Today we're looking ahead to the Carabao Cup Final this weekend as Liverpool take on Newcastle at Wembley. I'm delighted to say that I'm joined by Iain from the Daily Newcastle team. Iain, how's it going?
It's all going well. Thank you for asking, Ardash. We're just very excited about Sunday. Probably not really thinking about how the game's going to go, but just praying that we win somehow.
Yeah, it's going to be a cagey affair, I think, on Sunday. But we'll get into a lot about the game in today's episode. In part one, we're going to look at the form guide of both teams. In part two, we'll look at the key battles where the game would be won and lost. And then in part three, a predicted lineup for both teams and also score predictions. I don't know how you are feeling about score predictions, Iain. This is probably one of the games of the season you probably don't want to predict, but we're going to have to do it anyway. So, going into the form guide, I think. Let's start with Liverpool, obviously, because the big elephant in the room is that we're recording this the day after Liverpool have been knocked out of the Champions League by PSG on penalties. Obviously, I'm gutted. Iain, I know we were just talking a bit before the recording today, but from a Newcastle point of view, how does that game impact you looking at Liverpool? Do you think it brings inspired Liverpool on Sunday, or do you think they'll still be wounded?
I don't know. They look really down afterwards, understandably, because they played so much better in the second leg than they had done when they robbed Paris in Paris last week. Um, and it must be, given that the Premier League's probably already in the back pocket 6 weeks ago, it must be the main goal for the guys at Liverpool to have won that. I don't know how they win the group stage and then end up with the toughest opponent in the round of 16. It seems a bit harsh, that. I guess that's just the way the numbers worked. From our point of view, watching it last night, we're delighted it went into extra time, try and exhaust all of those Liverpool players. I know Trent went off, and he looks pretty doubtful for the cup final, which is got to be good news for us. That'll mean there'll be 3 assists from Conor Bradley, of course. But as it stands tonight, if Trent isn't playing, then we think that's evening up injuries, because we've suffered with a few in the last week and a half. Canate went off looking pretty clocked as well. I don't know if you can update us on how that's looking. I just saw him go off very sheepishly. And if he's not alongside Van Dijk, that will be very encouraging for Alex Isak to be working some magic for us.
I think Canate.
That's probably it.
Canate was I don't think it's too serious, but I think we'll probably get an update in the next few days. But yeah, I think from a Newcastle point of view, you must have enjoyed that extra time. We looked shattered towards the end of that game, and also if you're looking at from a penalties point of view, if the cup final goes to penalties, then maybe Liverpool need to definitely step up in that regard.
We'd have to hope that all of those fantastic players miss 2 penalties in a row, though, which is unlikely because we weren't expecting them to all miss, were we, last night?
Yeah, no, it's the pressure of penalties, isn't it? But I think from a Liverpool point of view, obviously, the cup final kind of comes in a way. You can argue it comes at a good time and at a bad time. In a good time, in terms of this is the perfect game to bounce back. You win a trophy, first trophy of the season. If you lose, it just puts a bit of a dampener on what's been a pretty tough week from a Liverpool point of view. But I'm the optimist, so I'm looking at this as an opportunity for us to bounce back. But from the Newcastle point of view, what's the mood going into this game? Because obviously we know what happened 2 years ago in the cup final against United, back at Wembley. It's a lot of anticipation around Newcastle in this cup final. So, how do you think the mood's been recently?
Yeah. Well, the mood in the last since we were knocked out of the FA Cup by Brighton. Obviously, Gordon was sent off in that game, so he misses the final. We learned a few days after that Lewis Hall had to have an operation on his ankle. He's out for the rest of the season. Sven Botman, who's just about been coming back for maybe 4 weeks, has also having a little operation on his knee, probably not back until May. So the mood through last week was increasingly desperate. We had this really weird Premier League match after everybody that we're battling against to get into Champions League places had picked up points away at West Ham, which was a real banana skin, given that we were these players short. Our form, this is a stat going back 20 years. We've played something like, I think it's 20 games before a cup final over the last 20 years, and we've won 5 of them now, including the West Ham one on Monday. So our form always dips when we've got something like this to look forward to. If we hadn't ground out that 1-0 win on Monday against West Ham, what a terrible match to watch, though. I mean, God help any neutral who sat all the way through it. But I think that's encouraging. A clean sheet, winning nasty, as it were, without Gordon. But some better performances from one or two of our key players who have been off it for the last 3 or 4 weeks. You might remember we went on a fantastic 9 straight win run, back down to earth with a bump over the last few weeks, but being brushed aside at Anfield, hammered by Man City there. We're fortunate in that we beat Nottingham Forest in between those. So effectively, that's like drawing 3 games against those top teams. So we haven't damaged our Champions League challenge. There's 10 games left. We're bang there. And I think that is key. So for me, the cup final is a bonus. It's going to be a fantastic day. I'm going to enjoy it, whatever happens. And after last night's game, I think maybe 1 or 2 areas have leveled up a little bit because we just felt like the whole world was on us last week.
Yeah, I think it's weird because going into before the PSG game, from a Liverpool point of view, I'm going into this week really excited. I'm like, okay, this is an opportunity to really, it's a big week of our season. Get through to the Champions League last 8, then the cup final. But it didn't happen like that, obviously, for Liverpool. And if anything, I've heard from a couple of fans in the Liverpool fan base. Now we're kind of worried on Sunday because you mentioned sort of Trent getting injured, and that's a big player that we're going to be missing for the cup final. He obviously missed last season's cup final as well at Wembley, and then Canate potentially being a risk. And yeah, if he's a risk for the game, Isak is going to have a lot less competition going forward on Sunday. But you're right in terms of the injuries, and I think I looked at that Newcastle team against West Ham, and it's still a strong team. From my point of view, you still got the back four looks solid. Livramento, I think, has done a really good job since moving to left back.
Well, I think Hall did really well against Salah at your
Yeah, he did.
place. I mean, he looked ridiculous. Some of the positions he had to get himself into, but he stopped him.
Mm.
Um, and we thought Livramento playing on that side might be okay because Livramento being a natural right footer, he's actually set up to put the tackles in every time Salah cuts in. That's still true, but what we noticed against West Ham is going forward.
Yeah,
Whereas Livramento makes all of those lovely overlapping runs, but it's like Trippier playing for England on the wrong side. He's got to stop the ball and bring it back onto his right foot before he can play it. So it takes um, a massive plus in our normal transition game because Hall overlapping with Gordon and then putting a cross straight in on his left foot is something that we use a lot. That's not going to be available. Um, yeah, compensated on that side of the pitch though. If you haven't got Trent playing his wonder balls, I heard him described as the best passer of the ball, best English passer of the ball in the Premier League, and he can't be far off.
Yeah, and it's a big player we're going to miss on Sunday. But I think there are obviously some players that are coming back to fitness that are going to be available, particularly from a Newcastle point of view. I think Joe Linton coming back as well makes a big difference. How do you see him? I know this is kind of touching into what we'll touch in part 2, but do you think Joe Linton will be operating as a midfielder or maybe on that left hand side,
Well,
given Gordon being out?
I think I think I think Joe Linton will stay in midfield so he can drop back almost as a third centre half at the corners because he's very good in the air in defensively, and Willock could play left wing and he is dynamic going forward. But I think the first choice, and that's why he was picked to play against West Ham, is for Barnes just to step into his natural position and replace Gordon. Now, Barnes has been, I think it's fair to say, I mean, he's come on off the bench and scored some good goals. I think he scored only one less than Gordon has this year, but he's nowhere near the dynamic player that Gordon is. That said, it was two Barnes efforts were the only two shots on target we had in the first half, and of course he played the assist for Guimaraes to score the winner against West Ham. So a much less flashy player than Gordon, but his numbers stack up. He is quite effective. I think he was picked and played through on Monday because that is Howe's preferred choice. Barnes hasn't had a lot of football, so you know, hopefully the West Ham game will have given him a little bit, making him a little bit more sharp. If he'd flopped, and he was still talking about how disappointing he is, but that's because we're comparing him to what Gordon does on that side. We'd be all right with Joe Linton keeping his left-sided midfield position and Willock going down the left, I think. So there's choices. We're going to keep you guessing.
Yeah, do you know what? To be fair, I'm a big fan of Harvey Barnes in terms of what he's done at Leicester, and since going to Newcastle it hasn't been as easy for him. But I think from a Liverpool point of view, if Harvey Barnes is starting on that left hand side, it's more of a threat, and I think he's going to cause more problems and ask more questions for that Liverpool defence than if it's Joe Linton, who's probably more effective in the middle than Harvey Barnes. So I think it's an interesting battle. But we're going to touch on key battles after this very short break.
Do you have a story that the world needs to hear? Have you struggled with reaching new audiences who are engaged with your story? Well, it might be time for you to start a podcast. Let me tell you about a platform we use here at Global Sports Podcast Network. Zencastr makes it easy to start a high-quality podcast built for growth from day one. With 4K video recording from your phone and AI editing that automatically removes the ums, as, you knows, and 22 other speech patterns, Zencastr makes it super easy to start a podcast that sounds great. Ready to tell your story? Well, check out the link in the show description to learn more about Zencastr.
Amazing. So, like I said before the break, we're going to talk about some of the key battles that will be happening on Sunday. Iain, I want to touch on the midfield battle first, because I think that's an interesting part of the pitch. We've got, I think Gravenberch, McAllister and Szoboszlai will probably start the game for Liverpool. Szoboszlai been absolutely incredible form recently, probably against a midfield of Tonali, Guimaraes and Joe Linton. Maybe there might be a few changes here and there, but how do you see that midfield battle shaping up? Because it seems quite a combative midfield in both aspects, but that, in my opinion, is where I think the game's going to be won and lost.
I think it depends if our guys turn up. I think if they're on form, if you go back to the matches against Arsenal in the semi-final of the Carabao Cup, if we have Joe Linton, Guimaraes and Tonali, although they didn't all play in all of those games, but when they played really well. If they're on form like that, I think we'll win the midfield battle. And if we can get the ball up to Isak, however many times, then who knows what will happen. When we played 2 or 3 weeks ago at Anfield, Guimaraes was way off it. And I think Joe Linton wasn't playing, was he? He was still injured.
He was injured, yeah.
And I think that's why Liverpool seemed to stroll to a 2-0 victory without getting out of third gear, really. Our only chance is for the guys to win the midfield battle. I think we've got an aging defence. He's saying it looks solid. It isn't. They'll give chances up just by misplacing passes. Lewis Hall being missing puts Livramento on the wrong side, brings Trippier, who is a fading star. He played really well against West Ham, but he's far less reliable than he was. Shah as well, the wrong side of 33. I think he would be first name on the team sheet this time last year. Now he's an accident waiting to happen. I heard somebody in the crowd saying that Shah and Byrne playing centre half against Brighton was like watching them playing in a bomb scare. To give you an idea of how jittery they look, and I honestly don't think that your front three will give them a moment's rest. So that could be all the good work in the midfield could easily be undone by one or two aberrations at the back from Newcastle. I mean, we gave you that first goal after 10 minutes, really, when we played at your place. This is what I mean. With so many games where we give up the first goal just almost to get started. We managed not to do it against West Ham and ended up winning 1-0. So, yeah, but the midfield for sure is the key battle. If we turn up, it'll be close. And if we don't, I think we'll be well beaten.
Yeah, and I think when it comes to a cup final in particular, that first goal is always the most important. It sets the tone of the game. But I think from a Liverpool point of view, Szoboszlai has been probably our standout midfielder over the last few weeks. We were saying on the podcast and at the Daily Liverpool on the Daily Liverpool show that each of our midfielders has kind of had their own moment this season. It kind of started off being the Gravenberch show at the beginning of the season. Then probably over the winter period, McAllister really stepped up. But now we're seeing Szoboszlai really feel like getting into his groove. And obviously, like you mentioned, he opened the scoring in the game at Anfield. How do you think he's going to be a big player from a Liverpool point of view? Because he just seems like he can run for days and days. Even at the end of that PSG game, he came off with about 10, 15 minutes to go, but he gives everything to the Liverpool shirt.
He certainly does. And me, other Newcastle supporters, perhaps, we've tracking him before he moved
Mhm.
because he was going to come to Newcastle, apparently, for a long time, right up until he signed for Liverpool. So I followed him with great interest since he started because thinking he should be in a black and white shirt. And we've got you Tonali instead as a midfielder, and you know now he's playing. We're really happy with him. Um, yeah, he runs all day, doesn't he? And he's a good player. He's a very good player. Um, it's all down to whether Joe Linton gets onto him and stops him. Depends whether Guimaraes and McAllister fall out. I think we go back to the match at St James's Park. They were on it that night, and McAllister didn't get anywhere near the ball um, because the three midfielders ran that show for the first half. I mean, Liverpool came out in the second half and were a different beast, but you were hanging on at the end of the first half. Um, and it'll be like that, won't it? It'll go in fits and starts, but yeah, I don't think you'll see um, Szoboszlai, if that's how you say his name, won't stop running. That's for sure. But he's got such a good shot on him. I mean, everything seems to be going through him at the moment. When Liverpool have kind of maybe I don't know if it's because you don't have to play as well anymore because you've got so far ahead in the Premier League. It does seem like Liverpool have gone off the boil a little bit, but not Szoboszlai. He is stepping up. His performance is improving.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think that's very good. I think that's a very fair point because we've kind of coasted the Premier League and no one's really challenged us when it comes to sort of those games. And I think from a Liverpool point of view, it's actually it's quite easy to say like, oh, we're not playing well, but we're still picking up points. And I think that's the most important thing when you're going for a title race or going far in any competition. Um, but yeah, like you said, Szoboszlai has been one of the players who's been consistent throughout that period. Um, and it's good that you mentioned the game at St James's because that day we looked really shaky at the back because of how well Newcastle press and the energy that you brought to that game. And if we're looking at front threes and how teams are going to set up and press, do you think it's a battle of the press as well? Because I think Isak sets the press really well for Newcastle. Obviously, Gordon has a big role in that, but he's going to be
Yes,
missing.
he does.
So, how do you think both teams, because they'll have probably a similar style of approach to the game, high energy, high intensity pressing? How do you see that battle in terms of the intensity?
Oh. Did Liverpool need to do it the whole game, or did they just do it to show what they could do, and then we stepped right back off it, and that's why you could just pick your moments to score? I think we need to, yeah, we need to be on it. We need to be bold. We need to go man for man. That might sound like suicide against Liverpool's excellent 11 men, but that's how the press can work for you. Um, and that intense press is our identity has been. We've been off it half the games this season. Um, and I think Gordon being missing for us will be a big loss because I don't think Barnes offers the same
Mhm.
sort of
Energy.
pressing.
Mm.
That might be That might be why it could be Willock who starts, because he will press. Whether it's effective or not is a different question. But he's more energetic and he'll get up and down quicker.
Yeah, and I think
It's just
one.
it's
Oh, sorry.
frightening to think about Liverpool pressing Shah and Burn. I think our most technically gifted defender is definitely Lewis Hall. He's got fantastic control, close control. Now Tino's not far behind him,
Hmm.
but I mean, we just got to hope that Trippier's experience means that he can marshal them so that they're able to get out of that. But expect more long balls, I think. The other thing which will make a big difference is whether it's Pope or Dubravka who gets picked to
Hmm.
play in goal. Because Dubravka is very good at the ball at his feet and picking out a pass to somebody, not just at the side of the box, but at chipping it over to somebody on the halfway line in a bit of space. Pope can't do that. Pope, I mean, we don't even want him to try to do that. If Pope wellies it that goes out in the opposition half, then that is one of the better sorts of his distribution with his feet. He's great at throwing the ball out. Um, so I think look at which goalkeeper we have to determine how well we're going to cope with a press. Because if it's Pope rolling the ball out to Burn, it'll go backwards and forwards. And if you're all over us, then yeah, they panic. They panic. It's scary to think of it.
It reminds me of when I think was it a few seasons ago in the cup final that Pope got suspended for the cup final against United, and then Dubravka was cup tied, and it meant that Karius was in goal, right?
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
Dubravka was on the Man United bench.
yeah.
Dubravka got a winners medal in that game, and we
So
had Karius in.
yeah, I mean, I can relate to how it's like to have Karius in goal. So, but I think it's a good point
He
you
only
mentioned.
played. He only played twice. He played in the cup final, and he played
Hmm.
one league game. It might have been away at Liverpool, was it,
Was
or away at Man City? It was a really big game. Um, They were the only two matches he played. I thought he did all right, actually. Couldn't
Hmm.
blame him for the goals. Horrible deflection to get Man U's second goal. Um, I thought he did all right. But there you go. He
Yeah,
was a good goalkeeper until that Champions League final.
he was. I we have this debate. I think he's actually a decent goalkeeper, but he's just had the worst game of his life in the
He
biggest game,
did.
the biggest game. So I think yeah, it's always going to impact him. But there's one more key battle that I want to touch on, and you kind of mentioned
Okay.
those long balls over the top. It's quite a mouth-watering key battle, but Van Dijk against Isak. I mean, you mentioned before we started recording, Isak always seems to score against Liverpool, and he always seems to give Van Dijk a tough game. Do you think that's where I personally think that's where the game is won and lost? If Van Dijk can handle Isak, I think Liverpool have a great chance. If Isak gets the better of Van Dijk, Newcastle have a great chance.
Well, who comes in instead of Canate if Canate's injured?
Kwanzaa has to come in, I think, but I'm hoping Canate is fit, but if not, Kwanzaa comes in and then right back. Bradley's still out injured actually, so it might be
Oh,
Endo
right.
coming in or not really sure who else. Maybe
See,
Simicast comes right back.
that might be a. Simicast is left usually, though, isn't
Yeah, I think we don't have cover because Gomez is also out injured as well, so
he?
it
Yeah,
might
yeah.
might be a tricky one. Not sure what we'll pick.
I think all of that will stack up as to how effective Isak is against Van Dijk. Um, Even with Trent playing, you remember Gordon whizzing past Trent and putting the ball through for Isak, who ended up getting fouled by Van Dijk when Van Dijk got a red card a couple of years ago. Uh, last year, Isak and Gordon combined for a very good goal. I know we ended up losing 4-2 on that somehow. It was 3-2 with 4 minutes to go, but I don't know how. Dubravka made about 15 saves that night. Yeah, he does do very well, and our hopes are pinned on Isak being able to do something for us. And we'll be looking for him. There is a good connection between Gamarish, Murphy, Isak. They kind of know where each other are without looking. And if you put Joe Linton and Willock together, because Willock's got a similar thing with Isak as well. I don't know if you remember the goal in the 6-1 against Tottenham, that where
Mm.
Willock
Oh yeah, plays
Hit
out
the
beautiful.
ball with the outside of his foot around the back of the defender, and Isak ran through to score. That was the fourth goal after that day, after 19 minutes. Yeah, if the Liverpool defence is disrupted and there's nobody in right back, you might actually see Harvey Barnes do some damage down there. I was talking to the Liverpool boys about Barnes, and they said that when he was a young lad, he used to go past people all of the time, but you could never score. He got injured at Leicester, practiced his shooting, suddenly became very good at shooting, and a lot of his goals are him cutting in and putting it into the
Hmm.
top corner. Um, but never ever went past another defender once he'd come back. And that's the Barnes who we've seen. He doesn't take anybody on. He'll cut in, and as we saw it when England played uh, in the World Cup, when you don't have anybody who's properly a left winger playing on the left wing, you just dilute your attack. Well, everything's going to come down the right, and it's very easy to defend against. So fingers crossed we won't fall into that trap. But yeah, I think that's whether I think Isak has got a bit of an Indian sign on Van Dijk. I mean,
Hmm.
he breezed past him and scored a wonderful goal to open the scoring in that 3-3 at Newcastle earlier this year. Um, and if he does tend to score against Liverpool, so hopefully he'll get one after about 10 minutes, and that'll settle us, and we'll give you a proper game.
Yeah, no, I think it's a number of key battles that are gonna be interesting on Sunday, but that's definitely one of them. After the break, we're gonna touch on score predictions and our predicted lineups.
Your body is unique. And Global Sports Podcast Network has partnered with Bioniq, the world's most personalised supplements. Bioniq provide 100% tailor-made supplements designed to deliver precisely what your body needs at exactly the right level to optimise your health. No guessing. So click the link in the show notes. Use the code GSPN2025 for 40% off your first month's subscription. Bioniq. Don't settle for off-the-shelf solutions made for just anybody. Get what's right for you right now. Your body is...
Amazing. So going into predicted lineups, I'm going to start with the Liverpool predicted lineup, and I think there'll be a few changes. Well, I'm hoping there's going to be a few changes because of what happened midweek in the Champions League, and I think a few players are going to be affected by that, especially injuries. Um, I think Canate is going to be fit, so I'm going to go with Alisson in goal. Which is quite harsh because Kelleher is usually our cup goalkeeper and he's had a really good recent record at Wembley. But I think you got to go Alisson. Kwanzaa will probably fill in at right back, Canate and Van Dijk centre backs, left back. I'm going Robertson. Midfield, I think it's that McAllister, Gravenberch, Szoboszlai midfield. They looked really tired against PSG though, so that's my only concern. But do I think Slot will freshen it up? I'm not too sure. And then up front, this is where the big dilemma is because do you start Darwin Núñez? I think you do. I think you start him. I think for Cup Final, he's going to be fired up. He's going to bring that energy. And Jota at the moment is not really cutting it. So I'm going to go
Is it 20 odd games since he scored, Jota?
Jota. Yeah, he's in. It's so weird because he's in such weird form. Like there is because he's had a few injuries this season, so he hasn't looked the same player. But he just looks like he's short of confidence, giving the ball away a lot recently as well, especially in that PSG game. He looks really short of confidence. So I think, and also if we're talking about penalties, I'd rather bring on Jota for a penalty shootout than Darwin Núñez. So I'll start Núñez. I think Diaz starts on the left hand side and Salah, the main man, on that right hand side. Before we get into Newcastle team, Ian, what do you think that's how Liverpool set up?
I I'd be surprised if Canate is fit after the way he looked when he came off. But if he is, then that sounds. I mean, I don't know who you'd play right back because, as you said,
Mm.
if Trent's out and then Bradley's injured and Gomez is injured, um, I, I don't know who else would fit in there because Connors is a centre half, isn't
Yeah, he's a
he?
centre
Yeah,
half,
yeah.
but
Well, that sounds reasonable. I think Kelleher might still play because he's an excellent goalkeeper. He hasn't done anything to let you down. And But I mean, he's no Allison, that's for sure. But why would he change it? Seems a bit
Yeah,
harsh. Is Slot a harsh manager like that?
I think so. I think because Kelleher did play. Allison played the first leg against Spurs in the Carabao Cup, but then I think Kelleher came in for the second leg. It's a weird one. I think Slot goes for Allison purely because he is quite ruthless, and I think he goes for the strongest team possible. He's
Fair
not
enough.
someone who's changed a lot recently, so I think Allison goes in goal. I'd love to see Kelleher in goal as well. I'll be happy with either, but I think he goes Allison.
There's a lot of Newcastle fans secretly have Kelleher on their shopping list in the summer, not James Trafford, because when Mama Dashvili comes in, he's going to be third choice at Liverpool. He's not going to get a game, is he? He's got to
Mm.
move on.
I think he will. And this is a separate point, but I think he will look to stay in the Premier League if he does move on. And I think, to be honest,
Yeah.
Newcastle teams I think it's the best choice for him. He's going to get guaranteed first team football. He's a quality goalkeeper, and he seems like a player that would be adored by the Newcastle fan base. It gives me that vibe that he would. So if he does move on in the summer, I think Newcastle's a good choice.
Let's see. I wouldn't
And,
mind him.
and
I wouldn't mind him at all.
maybe Isak comes in return in
But you'd
exchange.
have to send us about 15 Kelleher's if you want Isak.
Yeah, maybe have to chop up a few more $1 million. Probably like in the 50s, 60s, 70s, probably more than that. But that's a conversation for another day. Ian, what's your predicted lineup for the Newcastle
Well, we
team?
have a clean bill of health from Monday night. Eddie said on his match preview on Friday that he'd play his strongest team because it's an important Premier League match. We had to win that. If we hadn't won that, we'd have been languishing in ninth, something like 8 points off Nottingham Forest. So I think he played his best team on Monday, and I wouldn't be surprised if that was what he picked. We were surprised Pope got picked. To be honest, Dubravka's been in better form.
Mm.
But Pope didn't do anything wrong on the West Ham game. So if it's Pope, uh, Trippier, Shah, Byrne, and Livramento, with our Fab Three, Tonali, Gamarish, and Joe Linton in midfield, and I think Isak down the middle, Murphy on the right, pick themselves. Probably Barnes, because as I say, Eddie was fulsome in his praise of Barnes after the match. Because it was him who had his little flick and his little header and had shots on target, put the assist in for the goal. I don't think we change it. That said, it was a rather out of left field three-man, three centre halves, back five that we picked both games against Arsenal, and that was super effective. Our record down at their place is almost as bad as our record at Anfield, but we won that first leg 2-0. Playing 5-5-0 for the last half an hour, which was hilarious because Arsenal are really toothless up front, particularly now. And then I think Eddie just acknowledged that and said, "Well, we're just going to camp here 30 yards out. Let's see if he can score." And they had half an hour to do it and they couldn't. He might do something like that, although I think the option to do that is gone because Botman's injured.
Bournemouth injured, yeah.
Our Lascelles has been out and still out. So we'd have to bring Emil Kraft in if we wanted to play three men at the back. Couldn't possibly. He tried. Where was it? He tried this. I think he tried for about 5 minutes at the Man City game, playing Kieran Trippier as a third centre half with Murphy dropping back into wing back. But we didn't touch the ball for the first 5 minutes, and then we were three down after half an hour. So I don't think he'll play Trippier at centre half. That's for sure. It's boring, but he'll pick the same 11 to start that started against West Ham, and we'll go 4-3-3, and we'll just we'll try and take you on.
Yeah,
We'll
it's
try
gonna
and
be
win the battles, win the duels.
it's gonna be an interesting game. Before we wrap up the podcast, we should do some score predictions. It wouldn't be fair to not do score predictions, and I'm going to let you go first, Ian. I'm going to let you go
I
first.
thought you might. I thought you might. I don't know if you remember. every single match I do a score prediction for, I pick Newcastle to win 3-1. And that's been coming in fairly regularly this year. So, but could we win 3-1? Could you see Isak scoring an early goal, Liverpool pressing hard, but Newcastle breaking away, being 2 up at half time, then defending again,
dreamland for you guys.
then defending again, and Liverpool get one back, and they're pushing and they're pushing and they're pushing, but Wilson's on by then and breaks away and scores. We'll go for 3-1. Newcastle to win 3-1 in 90 minutes. Just got me fingers crossed we can get to penalties and then it's a 50-50 chance. No, Newcastle to win 3-1 is my prediction.
Bold prediction. That's
I know, big odds. That will be big odds.
Big odds,
hopefully
yeah.
It'll come in.
The big odds. There's definitely big odds on that. My experience of cup finals is that it's always a tight game. I just think it's going to be. I see. It's either a 1-0 or 1-1, and that's just because I know they're cagey. I think it will be a 1-0 to Liverpool. I honestly don't. And this might sound pessimistic, but
see, you're used to playing teams like Chelsea and Manchester City, and you've not played Newcastle in a cup final before. Come on, not since you went 3-up, won 3-0 in 1974, was it? See, that was easy. That was another Newcastle team that turned up and didn't play at Wembley.
It's tough. These cup finals, I think it's cagey, and I just think it's going to be a tight game, and I think it will be. I think a moment of magic wins the game, like a bit like last season, or just a corner set piece, something like that. I'm going to go with a 1-0 Liverpool win. Not sure who's going to score. There might be someone rogue, maybe a Darwin Núñez. It would be it's the sort of game where he could just do it and he could just win the cup for us. That is the sort of player he is. But
he does turn it on against Newcastle, that's for sure.
Yeah, he does. He has those teams where he just has a good record, and hopefully he can bring the win. From a Liverpool point of view, obviously you're hoping for that 3-1 victory on Sunday.
Yeah, well, we're really hoping for 1-1 and penalties because that's our best chance.
Penalties. If it goes to penalties, gosh, that is going to be a week of penalties for Liverpool. But yeah, that is all for today's episode of the Daily Liverpool podcast. Thank you, Iain, from the Daily Newcastle podcast. Go check out the Daily Newcastle podcast after this. They're going to be doing more previews for the game on Sunday, as will the Daily Liverpool team. It's a big game on Sunday before the March international break. Who will win? We'll find out on Sunday. Thank you, Iain, and thank you everyone for listening.
Thank you very much.
Every club, every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network.